The police charged toward my cabin for the 5th time in just 3 months, weapons drawn like they were responding to a serious crime. The reason? I had the audacity to paint my own home blue. Diana Peterson, the HOA tyrant, stood nearby with a smug grin plastered on her face. She clearly thought she had finally broken me, but Diana had no idea what was coming her way. Her spotless image, her chokehold on the neighborhood, and a shady little secret were all about to unravel right in the middle of a courtroom drama that would become the talk of the county. People like her are armed with authority and ruleless expect quiet submission. What they don't expect is a challenge backed by law and persistence. And I wasn't just resisting, I was ready to win. Have you ever dealt with someone in your neighborhood who wielded rules like weapons? Stick with this story. You're about to learn how to serve up satisfying justice illegally. After the pandemic, I needed a fresh start. My work as a freelance programmer meant I could settle anywhere with stable internet. I'd always dreamed of a peaceful spot near the water. So when I came across a listing for a modest wooden cabin by Lake Pinehurst in Wisconsin, something clicked instantly. The real estate agent explained that it was one of the original lakeside homes from the 1970s, offering a stunning view of the lake. What she failed to mention, however, was that the cabin came with an ongoing neighborhood conflict tucked neatly into the deed. My first week at the cabin felt like paradise. I set up my workspace near a big window facing the lake, soaking in nature's calm while I coded. I decided to refresh the porch by painting it a bold cobalt blue, a striking contrast to the dull beige and brown cabins surrounding mine. It felt good to inject some character into the place, to make it feel truly mine. I was mid-painting, perched on a ladder, humming a tune when a shadow crept across the porch. "Excuse me, that color hasn't been approved by the architectural committee," said a crisp voice from below. I turned to see a tall woman with meticulously styled silver hair and a perfectly pressed collared shirt so stiff it looked like it could stand on its own. Her arms were crossed tightly, and her lips were drawn into a pinched expression. "I'm Diana Peterson, president of the Pinehurst Lake Homeowners Association. All exterior changes must be approved in advance." I carefully descended the ladder and extended my hand. "Mason Turner, nice to meet you, but I think there's a bit of a mix-up. My property isn't part of the HOA." I pointed to the property map I'd received with the closing documents, one that clearly marked the HOA boundary stopping well before reaching my land. My lawyer and agent had both confirmed this before I bought the place. Diana's face stiffened, her smile growing more forced. "You may technically be outside the official boundary, but we have community standards that everyone here respects. That blue paint, it's disruptive. It affects property values and disturbs the visual harmony we've all worked hard to maintain." She thrust a thick binder into my hands. I took it, reluctantly. "Here's our handbook, 57 pages of rules we follow to preserve the community's appearance. I suggest you read it and choose a compliant color." I flipped through the binder. There were bizarrely specific rules like approved mailbox shapes and the exact lawn height limits. I looked back at her. "With all due respect, Miss Peterson, those rules don't apply to me." I made sure of that before I signed anything. Her eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that, Mr. Turner." And with that, she turned sharply and walked away, already dialing her phone. Later that day, I met my neighbor, Sarah Williams, a graphic designer who had moved in 6 months prior. "Let me guess, you've met the Dragon Lady," she said with a knowing smile. "Diana treats the whole like it's her private empire. I've been fined for the dumbest things like leaving my recycling out an hour too long or having wind chimes that make any sound at all. But my cabin's not even in the HOA," I told her. Sarah's smile faded. "That won't stop her. There are 5 cabins around here outside her control, and yours is one of them." She sees it as a personal insult. "The guy who lived in your place before you?" She tormented him until he gave up and sold to someone in the HOA. The next morning, I found a violation notice slid under my door. It accused me of using an unapproved paint color and ordered me to repaint within a week or face escalating penalties. I pinned it to my bulletin board and laughed. I figured it was a scare tactic. I was wrong. 3 more notices came over the week, each one more ridiculous than the last. They cited issues like misplacing outdoor furniture, unauthorized landscaping, I'd planted 3 native wildflowers, and excessive vehicle presence despite only owning a single car, which was parked in my own driveway. I was still laughing at the absurdity when, on the fifth day, Sheriff Mike Donovan showed up in his cruiser. From the window, I could see Diana standing on the edge of my property, pointing dramatically at my painted porch. The sheriff, a broad, tired-looking man with a face that had seen enough nonsense, he walked up and knocked. "Mr. Turner, I've received a report about unauthorized construction," he said, not quite looking me in the eye. I invited him in, showed him all my legal documents, and walked him through everything. To his credit, he actually listened. After reviewing the paperwork, he nodded. "Looks like you are right. You're not part of the HOA. I'll let Miss Peterson know there's nothing I can do." I watched him talk to Diana through the window, her face twisted in frustration as she gestured wildly. The sheriff shook his head and drove off. That evening, while I was grilling dinner on the porch, an elderly man with a cane slowly made his way up my driveway. He introduced himself as Herb Thompson, a retired county judge, 76 years old, and a longtime Lake resident. "Thought you should know what you're really up against, son," he said, settling into a chair. I offered him a drink as he continued. "Diana's not just hungry for control. There's a developer circling the lake, looking to buy the whole shoreline and turn it into some luxury resort. Homemembers who agree to sell get a hefty bonus and the board gets a big fat commission." But they didn't just see my blue porch as an eyesore to Anna Dramanest. It was a threat to her payday. According to Herb, they needed every single property to push the resort deal through. My cabin was the last piece in a puzzle she'd been quietly assembling for years. As Herb stepped off the porch, he paused and looked back with a grim expression. "Word of advice, son: document everything. Anna doesn't play fair, and what you've seen so far, that's just her opening move." I didn't know it then, but Herb was right. That was just her greeting. What followed was a full-blown campaign, and Anna Dramanest was ready to go scorched earth. Every day brought a new violation notice, stuffed under my door, taped to my mailbox, sometimes even weighted down with a rock on my porch. At first, I kept them out of amusement. A file labeled "A Lake Karen Chronicles" was born. Unapproved bird feeder, excessive lake viewing, trash bin lid color not conforming to guidelines. Absurd, hilarious, until it wasn't, because then came the cease and desist letter, from Thomas Reed, HOA attorney, a 4-page threat dripping with legalese, demanding I repaint my porch or face court. The tone made it clear they weren't just bluffing anymore. That's when I went full investigative mode. The county records office became my second home. Within days, I'd uncovered a gold mine. Every single cabin like mine, A5 in total, had existed decades before the HOA was ever created in 1995, meaning, no jurisdiction, no leverage, no right to enforce anything on us. But the real bombshell: every owner before me had faced the same bullying. One elderly couple was cited daily for minor nonsense: chimes that were too melodic, curtains that were visually disruptive. After 6 brutal months, they cracked and sold for $15,000 under market value. Another owner's boat somehow came untied during a storm after refusing an HOA buyout. The repair cost? $8,000. The HOA offer before the storm? $8,000 less than value. Not a coincidence. This was a pattern, a strategy. Psychological warfare disguised as community upkeep. I dug deeper into Anna Dramanest's past. Before she took over the HOA throne, she spent 22 years at a property management firm until she was dismissed for conflict-inducing behavior and abusive enforcement practices. Translation: she treated tenants like pawns and got caught. Former co-workers described her as controlling, punitive, and obsessed with domination through red tape. Classic Anna. So I documented everything: photos, audio recordings. I stored hard copies in a fireproof lockbox, cloud copies on multiple drives, because if she was capable of playing dirty, I was going to play smart. I told Sarah during one of our dockside chats. She looked over her shoulder before whispering, "Last week, Anna called an emergency HOA board meeting, called you a hostile disruptor. Said talking to you could get us all fined." I believed her. The next day, I saw a woman from the HOA board crouching behind a bush taking photos of my car. When I confronted her, she fled like she'd been caught committing a crime. Later that afternoon, a violation notice landed: improperly parked vehicle on HOA-maintained access road. It was a lie. The car was on my own gravel strip, a proven in the survey I'd already submitted to the county. My dad, a retired litigator, gave me the best advice: build a counter case, one piece of evidence at a time. I took it seriously. That evening, as the sky turned gold over the lake, I sat on my blue porch, the same one Anna wanted erased, and remembered being a kid, visiting this lake with Dad, skipping stones, watching loons drift past, sitting around a fire, listening to stories. This place wasn't just a scenic Zoom background, it was mine, a living memory. I wasn't going to hand it over to a woman playing queen of the cul-de-sac. Then came the cruiser, Sheriff Donovan again. Anna Nest stood just behind him, flanked by two HOA board members, all three filming on their phones like paparazzi. Noise complaint, he muttered, not making eye contact. I blinked. What noise? I used an electric screwdriver. Once. For 15 minutes. At 2 in the afternoon, he sighed. Look, I know, I have to respond, but between us, this is harassment. Be careful. Anna has influence. He motioned subtly toward the board members. She's got half the county council in her pocket. When he left, I invited him back later to review my files. He did off-duty. We sat in silence as he went through survey maps, timestamps, the cease and desist letter. These are clear, he said finally. You're not under HOA control, but that won't stop them from trying to ruin your life. He was right, because over the next 2 weeks, things escalated. I got reported for illegal composting, even though I was following state guidelines. My internet went out for 3 straight days, though no other home nearby had issues. The power flickered only in my cabin, multiple times. The garbage pickup forgot my house 3 times in 1 week. It was more than war. It was siege. And I was done playing defense. 1-star reviews started appearing on my freelance programming business profiles, all from local IPs, all within days of each other. Coincidence? Not a chance. It was Anna Nest's digital smear campaign, a new front in her escalating war. But the real breaking point came in a crisp envelope with a familiar name at the bottom: Thomas Reed. Another formal threat of litigation, this one more aggressive than before, accusing me of persistent violations of community standards and demanding immediate compliance or face court action. I nearly laughed until I saw the fine print at the bottom: admitted to the Wisconsin bar, 2005. Curious, I ran a social media check, and there it was. Thomas Reed was Anna Nest's first cousin. Unbelievable. A blatant conflict of interest, completely undisclosed. My hands shook with a mix of fury and disbelief as I stared at the letter. My dad's words echoed in my mind: bullies don't stop when you ask nicely, they stop when you hit back harder, 10 times harder. But how do you hit back at someone hiding behind bureaucracy, law firms, and HOA bylaws? The answer came from the last place I expected: the dusty underbelly of the county archives. For days, I buried myself in Wisconsin statutes, zoning laws, and whole imitations. The county records office staff started greeting me by name as I shuffled in with a thermos and legal pad. I became fluent in legalese and familiar with the musty scent of old paper and mildew-stained binders. That's when I found it, a faded map from the early 1980s. Almost missed it, but there it was, a faint pencil annotation scrawled across the shoreline: Historic Overlay Zone. What did that mean? I wasn't sure, but I flagged it. The deeper I went, the more patterns emerged. I waded through hand-typed meeting minutes from 1972, when the original Lake Association was first formed, day long before the official HOA even existed. Back then, the focus was simple: community dock repairs, lake cleanup weekends, and fish stocking. No fines, no threats, no power plays, just neighbors helping neighbors. But over time, especially after Anna Nest took over 15 years ago, that spirit eroded. Slowly, methodically, power consolidated into fewer hands. A community became a kingdom, and Anna crowned herself queen. I built a detailed timeline showing exactly how it happened, at the evolution from community to control, and who benefited most at each stage. One evening, blurry-eyed and packing up, an older woman behind the records desk called out to me. "Find what you're looking for?" she asked, watching me with quiet interest. When I explained my situation, she leaned in, lowered her voice. "You'll want to look up the Wisconsin Area Freedom Act of 1983. Her eyes twinkled. "It's not common knowledge, but it might just save your property." She pulled it up on her computer and printed the full statute for me. The language was clear as day. No homeowners association may impose or enforce architectural, aesthetic, or usage restrictions upon properties not legally incorporated within its registered boundaries at the time of enforcement. It even outlined penalties, actual legal consequences, for associations that tried. She smiled as she handed it over. "My husband and I fought a similar battle at Cedar Lake back in the 90s. These associations, they get drunk on power. They forget they exist to serve, not rule, but the law's on your side if you're brave enough to use it." Before I could thank her, she slipped me a card with her name and personal number. "Call if you need anything. Some battles are worth fighting." And in that moment, for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was under siege. I felt armed with knowledge, proof, and a path forward. I had the law, I had documentation, and most importantly, I had resolve. Anna Dramanest had picked the wrong cabin to push. With my newfound confidence, I decided to connect with the other 4 cabin owners also located outside the HOA's official boundary. We met quietly at Herb's place, the farthest property from Anna Dramanest's ever watchful gaze. Among them was a retired school teacher, a local doctor and his wife, and a young couple who had recently inherited their cabin from the woman's grandfather. "She's been after us for years," the teacher said bitterly. "I once got a violation notice for a bird bath." "A bird bath," said it was an unauthorized water feature. "We're constantly being photographed," added the younger woman. "It feels like we're living under surveillance." We were seriously considering selling just to get away from the harassment. That was exactly what Anna Dramanest wanted. I shared with them the Wisconsin Area Freedom Act and the boundary documents. Their eyes lit up. For the first time, we felt like we had something solid. We agreed to stand together, quietly, but firmly. We set up a secure group chat to document incidents, share advice, and watch each other's backs. But Anna must have had informants. Within 24 hours, the retaliation escalated. A coordinated smear campaign exploded on the neighborhood's social media page. Anonymous posts claimed I was running an illegal business out of my cabin and ruining the area's aesthetics with tacky renovations. Suddenly, home members began filing daily complaints about everything. The old pickup truck in my driveway, the length of my grass, even a decorative wind chime Sarah had gifted me as a housewarming present. The next afternoon, I was planting native wildflowers in my small garden when Sheriff Donovan's cruiser pulled up for the 3rd time that month. Across the street, Anna Dramanest and 2 HOA board members stood openly filming the encounter. "Got another complaint," Donovan said, visibly annoyed. "Illegal dumping toxic materials in your yard." I showed him the organic soil bags and the labeled seedlings I'd been planting. "Does this look toxic to you, Sheriff?" he sighed, glancing over at the spectacle across the road. "Mason, this is getting out of hand. I've got real police work to do." He hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "Between us, I've been documenting these false reports. There could be legal consequences." After he left, I invited him inside and showed him the Freedom Act documents and the official boundary maps. "This is interesting," he said, studying the material. "I wasn't aware of this law. You might really have something here." Later that evening, Herb stopped by with more than just encouragement. He came with history. Anna Dramanest was fired from her job at Wilson Manufacturing about 8 years ago. He told me, management position. Something about creating a hostile work environment and abusing her authority. Running the HOA is her redemption arc. It's the only place she feels powerful now. Meanwhile, Sarah was keeping her distance, clearly afraid of attracting HOA attention, but she texted me a warning. Anna had called an emergency board meeting. Topic: The North Shore Problem. Translation: Us. With everything I had, I drafted a formal cease and desist letter addressed to the HOA. It cited the Freedom Act in detail, demanded they halt all enforcement actions against my property, and outlined every incident of harassment with dates, photos, and witness accounts. I sent copies to every board member, the HOA's attorney, and the county property office. The response came swiftly and predictably. Thomas Reed replied with a smug, dismissive letter claiming the Freedom Act was obsolete and had been superseded by more recent community development statutes. He concluded with a subtle threat. The association recommends you consult with a real attorney before making further legally unsound assertions. I read it carefully. No legal citations, just arrogant bluster. But as a programmer, I'm trained to recognize logical gaps, and this letter was full of them. Reed was bluffing. His overconfidence was a cover. There was something more they were hiding, something big. I doubled down at the county archives. If there was a deeper motive behind their desperation, I'd find it. And what I uncovered changed everything. Buried among old property filings and land use permits was a draft proposal titled, Pinehurst Lake Luxury Resort and Spa proposed by Meridian Development Group. I stared at the header. Meridian was one of the largest resort developers in the Midwest. The document, dated just 3 months before I moved in, outlined plans to purchase the entire lakefront, demolish every existing cabin, and build a 200-room resort complete with a golf course, 3 restaurants, a marina, and spa facilities. But the most telling section, a community transition bonus for any HOA board members who successfully facilitated the acquisition of nearby properties. Suddenly, Anna Dramenest's obsession with control made perfect sense. This wasn't about bird baths or property values, this was about money, big money. According to the fine print, each cooperating board member stood to receive a $25,000 consulting fee once all properties were under HOA control. And the president, double. They needed every property around the lake, including mine. The renderings showed a massive concrete complex that would wipe out the forested shoreline. Ancient pines, gone, replaced with turf lawns, artificial beaches, and concrete retaining walls. One section even proposed draining and reshaping part of the lake to install a golf course water feature. The environmental impact report was laughably thin, brushing off concerns about wildlife habitats and water quality with empty reassurances and vague green commitments. I sat back, stunned. This was never about me being a difficult neighbor. My refusal to sell wasn't just a personal annoyance, it was threatening their entire multi-million-dollar plan. And now, they were getting desperate. But this time, I had the proof. Even more disturbing than the resort proposal were the meeting minutes I found from a closed-door Anna Dramenest board session, held just 3 months prior. In them, Anna had explicitly instructed board members to keep the development deal secret from the general HOA membership. Her reasoning? It could complicate negotiations if word got out before signatures were secured. In short, they were conspiring to sell out their neighbors without consent, consultation, or even warning. Worse, the minutes revealed a cold discussion about using HOA reserve funds, money collected from members for repairs and community upkeep, to hire a property acquisition specialist who could pressure remaining owners to sell. I carefully photocopied every page, then returned the originals exactly as I'd found them. This wasn't just small-town pettiness anymore. This was calculated fraud, a breach of fiduciary duty, and they were using their power to enrich themselves at the expense of a historic, generational community. Fury built in my chest as I pictured Anna Dramenest casually engineering the destruction of everything people had built around this lake just for a fat payday and an ego boost. I called a meeting with the other non-HOA property owners and laid out everything. "They're not just trying to bully us," I said, handing around copies of the resort proposal and meeting minutes. "They're actively plotting to push us out for their own financial gain." "That explains the offer I got last month," the retired teacher said. 20% below market value. I said no, and the harassment doubled the next week. We all agreed to hold the line. Each of us sent formal cease and desist letters, citing the Wisconsin Area Freedom Act, and documented every instance of harassment we had endured. Within days, identical letters arrived from the Anna Dramenest board. Legal threats, demands for compliance, warnings of serious legal consequences. We laughed, because now we knew the truth, and so did our lawyers. I fired back a blunt reply, refusing to acknowledge any HOA authority over my property and stating my full awareness of the resort development scheme. The impact was immediate. The next morning, Anna Dramenest herself arrived at my front porch. Beside her, Thomas Reed, HOA attorney and part-time intimidation expert. "You're making a serious mistake, Turner," Anna said coldly, eyes narrowed. "This community has standards, and one way or another, you will comply." I stayed calm, holding my phone up so the recording was obvious. "I'm not part of your HOA, Miss Peterson. The Wisconsin Area Freedom Act is very clear about that." Thomas stepped forward, his expression trying for intimidation but failing under his 5'8" frame. "That statute won't save you," he said. "We have the resources to drag this out in court. Litigation's expensive." "You're a freelance programmer, right?" "Not exactly deep pockets." I looked straight into the camera lens. "Is that a threat, counselor? Because it sure sounds like you're threatening frivolous litigation to force compliance with rules that don't apply to me." "I'm pretty sure the Bar Association would have some thoughts about that." Anna's polished facade began to crack, her nostrils flared. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she snapped. "I've run this community for 15 years. People who cross me don't stick around." I didn't flinch. "That's interesting. It also sounds a lot like another threat. Maybe Sheriff Donovan would want to hear it in your own words." Her face flushed deep red. She jabbed a manicured finger toward my chest. "You think you're so clever, with your blue porch and your legal loopholes. This isn't over, not by a long shot." As they turned to leave, a neighbor across the street called out, "Everything okay, Mason?" "Should I call someone?" Anna glared at her. But the woman didn't flinch, at her phone already in hand, screen glowing. Less than an hour later, Sheriff Donovan's cruiser pulled up again. "Fourth visit in 6 weeks. But this time, it was different." "Got a report of a disturbance," he said. "Someone claimed you were threatening HOA representatives." "I recorded the entire interaction," I replied, playing the footage right there on the porch. Donovan watched silently as Anna Dramenest and Reed made veiled threats, all caught clearly on camera. His jaw tightened. "This is crossing a line," he muttered. "I've been patient, because Anna's got friends with the county commissioners, but this is harassment, plain and simple." He turned to Anna, still loitering across the street. "Mrs. Peterson," he called, voice hard. "I need a word with you about filing false police reports." I couldn't hear every word of their exchange, but Anna's posture said it all. Defensive, then disbelieving, and finally furious. Sheriff Donovan stood his ground. Calm, professional, unmoved by Anna's name-dropping or intimidation tactics. And in that moment, I realized something important. Donovan was taking a real risk by challenging someone with political pull, but he chose to uphold the law anyway, and that earned my respect. That evening, as the sun dipped below the edge of Lake Pinehurst, doubt finally crept in. For the first time, I questioned everything. The relentless stress had started to seep into every part of my life via my work, my sleep, my peace of mind. In a quiet, exhausted moment, I actually considered giving in, selling the cabin, leaving the mess behind, starting over somewhere untouched by Anna Dramenest and her chokehold on the neighborhood. I called my dad. He listened quietly as I vented, then said, "Remember when I used to take you fishing at that lake?" "Yeah," I said, caught off guard by the memory. "You were maybe 8. Caught a huge bass all by yourself. Everyone else had packed it in, but you refused to quit. It was getting dark and cold, but you hung in there." I smiled. "I remember." He paused, then added, "Some things are worth fighting for, son." That place meant something to us then. It still does. Don't let bullies take that away from you. If they're getting desperate, it means you're doing something right. After we hung up, I noticed a text from an unknown number. Anna falsified the HOA boundary documents after registration. "I have proof. Meet me at the county clerk's office tomorrow at 11 a.m. A concerned citizen. It all started clicking into place. Anna wasn't just a bully, she was a fraud. And now, I had a witness. But I didn't get the chance to act on it right away. The situation escalated fast. That night, a vicious storm slammed into Lake Pinehurst, dumping 5 inches of rain in just a few hours. Trees came down all around the shoreline. At some point in the chaos, I woke to a steady drip right over my bed. The roof had finally lost its decades-long battle with the elements. When the sun rose, I surveyed the damage. A huge section of shingles had been ripped clean off, leaving the wooden frame exposed and soaked. I immediately threw up a tarp, then started calling contractors. The soonest anyone could come, 3 days. I couldn't wait that long, so I drove into town, picked up supplies, and decided to fix it myself. My years of helping my uncle's roofing crew back in Milwaukee came rushing back a hot summer days, long hours, and the sore muscles that paid for my first computer. Now, those skills were saving my home. The work was physically brutal. Climbing the steep roof, replacing section after section as wind gusted around me, but there was something deeply therapeutic about it, something honest. For once, my progress was visible and real. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to before started showing up, not ho folks, just good people. An elderly man brought a thermos of coffee. A family I'd helped clear fallen limbs the day before arrived with sandwiches and tarps. This was the real community. People helping people, not because of a rulebook, but because it was the right thing to do. But of course, Anna Dramenest couldn't stand that kind of unity. By midday, word had spread through the whole grapevine. Anna called an emergency board meeting and, within hours, issued a new storm recovery aesthetic ordinance. It mandated specific colors, materials, and even repair timelines for all visible rebuilding. But that wasn't the worst part. Anna somehow convinced the county's emergency management office to give her temporary authority over all lakefront properties. The documents granting this power were vague, citing obscure municipal codes, aesthetic integrity, and unified recovery coordination. In the middle of a disaster, she had seized control using chaos as cover. I kept repairing my roof anyway, using quality materials, but not the ones listed in their arbitrary ordinance. By morning, other cabin owners were doing the same. The result was striking: 2 clearly divided recovery zones. Beige, cookie-cutter home repairs on one side, a broken bar and vibrant, personalized, free homes on the other. On day 3, I got a hand-delivered court summons. The Anna Dramenest HOA was suing me. Their claim: willful violation of emergency safety protocols. The punishment: an injunction to stop all repairs immediately. Thomas Reed had filed the lawsuit, including newly altered maps showing my cabin is somewhere within HOA boundaries. This is crossing a line, I told Sarah, who had braved HOA threats just to bring me soup while I worked. They're actually falsifying legal documents now. You're not the only one they're targeting, she replied, but some of us are starting to ask questions. At that emergency board meeting, Patricia Anderson, she's the treasurer, kept pushing to see the original boundary maps. Anna shut her down hard. That evening, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Turner, this is Patricia Anderson. A broken bar from the HOA board. Her voice was low, nervous, as if someone might be listening. I've been treasurer for 3 years. What's happening now? It's not right. I was there when Anna and Thomas altered the boundary maps. They changed the documents just before submitting them to the court for the emergency ordinance. She paused, then asked quietly, "Would you be willing to testify to that?" I asked, hardly believing my luck. You'd really testify?" Yes, Patricia said firmly. This has gone too far. Anna Dramenest is risking the entire association's legal standing just to secure her resort commission. Some board members are having second thoughts, but they're scared. Scared of her. She explained that Anna had become increasingly unhinged as pushback mounted. In one closed-door executive session, she'd ranted about taking control once and for all and making examples of anyone who got in her way. She's not even pretending this is about property values anymore, Patricia whispered. It's about domination, the winning at any cost. And I'm genuinely worried about what she might do next. The next morning, Sheriff Donovan arrived at my cabin for the 5th time, but this visit was different. He was holding an official court order, requiring me to stop all repairs immediately, based on those falsified jurisdiction claims. And standing nearby, smug and satisfied, was Anna Dramenest, arms folded, that same victorious little smile she always wore when she thought she'd won. "I told you," she called across the lawn as Donovan approached. "You couldn't win." But I didn't argue. I just smiled. "Thanks for coming out, Sheriff," I said evenly. "I was hoping you'd stop by." I needed another witness. From behind the door, I pulled out a thick binder. "I'd like to file formal charges for document fraud, harassment, and abuse of emergency powers." Anna's expression shifted. Fast. Triumph turned to tension. Sheriff Donovan flipped through the folder. His brow furrowed deeper with every page. Inside were the original boundary records from the county, Patricia's sworn statement about the falsified maps, and over 30 meticulously documented harassment incidents complete with timestamps, photographs, and witness accounts. "I'll need to review this thoroughly," Donovan said, growing more serious by the minute. "If what you're saying holds up a broken bar, this is extremely serious, Mr. Turner." "Oh, it holds up," I told him, "and there's more." I showed him the resort development proposal Anna and Thomas had tried to hide, complete with a payout structure showing how HOA board members would earn commissions for each property sale. Within 24 hours, I had filed a countersuit. The defendants, the Anadromist HOA, Anna herself, and Thomas Reed, charges: harassment, document fraud, abuse of process. The moment the news spread, the reaction was explosive. HOA members who'd blindly trusted their leadership started asking real questions. Several of them called for an emergency assembly to investigate the board's actions. Sarah circulated a petition signed by over half the members demanding transparency and accountability. The message was clear. Anadromist had gone too far. The next day, she received her court summons. Her face, when she was served, twisted from arrogance to outright panic. I almost felt sorry for her, almost, but this wasn't just about my cabin anymore. This case was about exposing something much bigger, a conspiracy of greed disguised as community care. The courthouse was packed on the morning of the hearing. Every single HOA member showed up. So did the 5 non-HOA property owners. Even curious locals and a regional journalist from the Ledger were seated in the back. I arrived early, dressed in a crisp suit, carrying a portfolio of evidence so organized it could have passed a corporate audit. Across the aisle, Anadromist entered, flanked by Thomas and 2 additional lawyers from his firm. Their legal team exuded confidencia until they noticed something. I didn't have a lawyer. Thomas smirked and leaned toward me. "A programmer playing lawyer," he muttered loudly enough for the gallery to hear. "This should be entertaining." Judge Eleanor Watkins entered, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with 3 decades of legal experience. She adjusted her glasses and scanned the courtroom. "I understand we're here to address 2 motions," she said. "First, the HOA's emergency injunction regarding repairs a broken bar, and second, Mr. Turner's countersuit alleging harassment, document falsification, and misuse of authority." She gestured to Thomas. "You may begin." Thomas stood, adjusting his tie with the usual dramatic flair. "Your Honor, the Lake Pinehurst Homeowners Association, under emergency conditions following the storm, implemented temporary repair standards to ensure safety and structural cohesion. Mr. Turner has deliberately ignored these standards, posing a risk not only to his own property but potentially neighboring structures as well." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And your authority to enforce these standards on Mr. Turner's property comes from a broken bar?" Thomas walked confidently to the projector and displayed a map showing my cabin within HOA boundaries. "As you can see, Your Honor, this map reflects our jurisdiction." I stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to present certified copies of the original boundary maps, filed with the county in 1995. They clearly show my property is outside the HOA's legal limits." I handed the judge the documents. "And while I'm at it, I'd like to submit the Wisconsin Area Freedom Act, which explicitly prevents any HOA from enforcing rules on non-member properties, no matter how integrated the community may feel." Judge Watkins examined the materials carefully. Her face gave nothing away. "Mr. Reed," she said, "how do you explain the clear discrepancy between these 2 maps?" Thomas cleared his throat. "The newer map reflects the practical boundaries of the neighborhood, Your Honor. Mr. Turner's cabin is part of the community. It's long been treated as such." "That's not how HOA jurisdiction works," Judge Watkins replied, voice sharp. "They are legal entities, with legal borders, and those borders cannot be changed without the written, recorded consent of all affected property owners." I stepped forward again. "And Your Honor," I said, my voice steady, "the HOA leadership didn't just break the law, they abused it." I presented every piece of evidence I had. Dozens of bogus violation notices, sworn statements from neighbors who saw Anna photographing my cabin, records of repeated false police reports, Sheriff Donovan's signed affidavit detailing the harassment. "And finally," I added, lifting the final document, a development proposal signed by the HOA board showing financial incentives for the forced sale of non-HOA homes. The board compensation structure clearly highlighted that the Anadrama Nest hosted to profit substantially, but only if every property around the lake was brought under their control as part of a broader resort development scheme. A murmur swept through the courtroom. HOA members turned toward Anna, their expression shifting from confusion to betrayal. Whispers of "she lied to us and I didn't sign up for this" rose across the gallery. Thomas sprang to his feet. "Your Honor, these accusations are baseless and completely irrelevant to the issue at hand." "What is relevant is this." He held up a document with dramatic flair, striding forward like a performer on stage. "This signed agreement bearing Mr. Turner's signature shows that he explicitly agreed to abide by the HOA's regulations when purchasing his property, regardless of outdated boundary disputes." Gasps echoed in the room as the bailiff handed me the paper. I took it calmly, scanned it, then allowed myself a small, quiet smile. "Your Honor," I said, holding the document aloft. I anticipated this exact tactic. I opened a folder and handed over a forensic handwriting analysis I had commissioned weeks ago. "This signature is a forgery, and here," I continued, "are verified samples of my signature from official documents, notarized and time-stamped." Then, I called Patricia Anderson to the stand. As the HOA's treasurer, her testimony cut like a blade. I watched Anna and Thomas alter the boundary documents before submitting them. She testified, "They literally used Photoshop to shift the property lines." "What reason did they give?" I asked. Anna said it was a technical correction to reflect how things really are. But I knew it was wrong. Judge Watkins turned to Thomas, her gaze narrowing like a blade being sharpened. "Counselor Reed," she said, her voice icy, "I sincerely hope you didn't learn this behavior in law school." Next, Herb Thompson took the stand, a lifelong local. He recounted the early days of the lake community before any HOA existed. The 5 North Shore cabins, including Mr. Turner's, always operated independently, he said firmly. "That's just how it was." Then Sarah and several other current HOA members gave their testimony detailing Anna's increasingly autocratic behavior, and how she launched pressure campaigns against anyone who questioned her authority. The turning point came when Anadrama Nest herself took the stand. I questioned her calmly, pressing about the altered documents, the developer deals, and the harassment. She evaded, deflected, danced around every answer, but after 20 minutes, under pressure, she cracked. "The HOA was the only place I felt valued after I got fired," she snapped. "I built it into something meaningful, something powerful, and I'm not going to let 5 stubborn holdouts ruin everything I've worked for, even if it means breaking a few rules, even if it means breaking the law," I asked quietly. Before she could respond, Judge Watkins raised a hand. "I've heard enough." She looked out over the packed courtroom. "This court finds in favor of Mr. Turner. The emergency injunction is dissolved, and the HOA is permanently barred from enforcing regulations on any properties outside its legal boundaries." She turned toward Thomas, the weight of judgment in her voice. "As for the allegations of document fraud, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation." "And Counselor Reed," she added sharply, "I strongly suggest you begin preparing for a conversation with the Bar Association's Ethics Committee." Anadrama Nest and Thomas left the courtroom in absolute disarray. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by pale faces and hurried steps. Their carefully constructed empire was collapsing. In the hallway, HOA members who had once blindly followed Anna approached me. "We are sorry," one man said. "We should have asked more questions." Another woman clutched the edge of her folder. "We didn't know about the resort plan's a broken bar. She would have displaced all of us." I had won the case, but that was only half the story. While reviewing the documents uncovered during discovery, I stumbled on something that no one, not even the HOA, seemed aware of. A small handwritten notation on an old map, "Historic Overlay Zone." It seemed innocuous, but I had a hunch. After the trial, I dove deep, researching every zoning law, every filing, every dusty archive I could access. And what I found was nothing short of explosive. In 1968, the entire Lake Pinehurst region had been designated a Wisconsin Historic Preservation District, thanks to its unique ecology and the heritage of its early summer cabins. This designation carried enormous legal weight. It strictly prohibited large-scale development, and heavily restricted the power of any HOA to make sweeping regulatory changes without state approval. The designation hadn't been revoked, it had just been forgotten, buried under decades of bureaucracy and digitization. Armed with the documents, I returned to Judge Watkins and the county planning office. The response was swift and seismic. The Meridian Development Group's plans for the resort, blocked permanently. Their proposal violated multiple provisions of the preservation order. The Andromeda HOA, stripped of any authority beyond their actual jurisdiction. The authority of the Andromeda HOA was permanently restricted, limited only to aesthetic matters that complied strictly with historical preservation guidelines. Gone were the days of overreach and unchecked control that had defined Anna's reign. The fallout for her was swift and unforgiving. A vote of no confidence from the remaining HOA members forced her immediate resignation as president. As for Thomas, he faced a formal ethics investigation from the Wisconsin Bar Association for his role in forging legal documents. Disbarment or at least a suspension seemed all but certain. The court ordered the HOA to pay damages to me and the other non-HOA cabin owners for the harassment, legal intimidation, and attempted land grab. An even broader inquiry was launched by the county this time into how emergency powers had been granted during the storm without proper review. The truth was unraveling faster than anyone could cover it. Andromeda was ultimately forced to sell her beloved lakefront cabana, the same one she'd once ruled from like a queen on a throne, to cover her mounting legal expenses. She moved to an aging mobile home park on the outskirts of town. Ironically, she occasionally ran into Sarah, the very neighbor she had once tried to silence. Sarah had just been elected as the new HOA president on a platform of transparency, cooperation, and respect for property rights, and under her leadership, the Andromeda HOA underwent a total reformation. They scrapped the old, oppressive bylaws. A new charter was drafted, one that emphasized community, not control. To everyone's surprise, something beautiful began to emerge from the ruins. The Lake Pinehurst Preservation Alliance, a joint initiative of HOA and non-HOA residents. It focused on preserving the natural beauty and historic character of the lake together. With the legal wars finally behind me, I turned my attention to what had started it all, my cabin. I completed the roof repairs, following the historical preservation guidelines, which ironically aligned with the original 1970s design I had always admired. The blue porch stayed, of course, but I added some natural wood accents that gave the cabin a classic yet personal feel, something that honored the area's heritage without erasing my identity. As summer rolled in, I hosted a lakeside barbecue, open to everyone, even those who had once sided with Anna. It was time for healing, and a chance to restart as neighbors, not adversaries. Sheriff Donovan showed up, not in uniform, but with a plate of ribs and a somber look. He pulled me aside and offered a sincere apology. I should have investigated the complaints earlier, he said. Sometimes doing the right thing means questioning authority even when it's uncomfortable. That conversation stuck with me. Inspired by everything I had been through, I began writing what would become the Homeowners' Rights Handbook, a practical, plain English guide to standing up to HOA overreach. I distributed it for free in mailboxes around Lake Pinehurst and online, hoping it could be a lifeline for someone else, somewhere, facing similar injustice. A few weeks later, as I sat on my porch watching the sun sink behind the lake, I noticed a slow-moving car. Andromeda. She barely looked like the woman I'd once faced in court. Her posture slumped, her gaze distant. She didn't even notice me at first, but I raised my hand in a gentle wave. No bitterness, no smugness, just a quiet acknowledgement of what had passed. Later that evening, I mailed her a copy of the handbook with a note: "Everyone deserves to understand their rights." To my surprise, the handbook gained traction far beyond our small community. Homeowners from all over Wisconsin started reaching out, sharing stories of power abuse, legal gray areas, and small victories. It made me think about my father, his principles, his quiet strength. Maybe it was time to follow in his footsteps and study law, not for status, but to help others stand up to institutions that forget they serve people, not power. Lake Pinehurst became a kind of modular living example that a community didn't need fear or force to function. Its preservation district status ensured it would never become just another overdeveloped resort. It would remain a place of quiet beauty, family traditions, and cabins that whispered stories through pine needles and lake breezes. In the end, I understood that this fight had never really been about a porch or even about property rights. It had been about facing down bullies, about protecting something that mattered. My father had taught me to fight for what's worth protecting, and Lake Pinehurst, with its still waters, fading dock paint, and sense of timeless peace, was absolutely worth it. Sometimes, building a real community means you have to fight for it, even if it means facing the police 5 times, even if it means going toe-to-toe with someone like Anna Drummond.